children, how are you? Today I am going to teach you very important lesson in coordination. Did you remember? I teach you early two systems related to coordination. One is nervous system, the other one is endocrine system. Today I am going to teach you detail about nervous system. Okay? Now you can see competency level 2 in unit 5, the gross structure and function of the brain, the spinal cord and the peripheral nervous system of human. First I am going to teach you about the brain. So you know it's a very important part, it's a vital organ in human. So this is actually present within the cranial, within the cranium, so which is bony covering. Okay? So you can see the rest of the part is actually present within the vertebral column. Two major parts in the central nervous system, as you seen here, brain and the spinal cord. Now here what you can see is different parts in the brain: cerebrum, midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata, cerebellum. These are the regions related to the brain. Okay? Now next part, next region is called spinal cord. So earlier lesson I taught you how these regions are developed from the embryonic brain. So this is the development of different part of the adult human brain from the embryonic brain. So as you see in the far right, so you can see a diagram, so it shows three major regions: forebrain, midbrain and the hindbrain. Okay? Then you can see it develops into some more regions during the embryonic development. When the embryo is about 5 weeks old, it has many regions. It further develops into very complex structure in adult brain. Can you see the blue color region? That is the region which develops from the forebrain. Then in the adult brain, so you can see number of regions are actually produced from this region. First one, the largest region you can see here, this one, here this is the cerebrum. Okay? Next one is the thalamus, right? Then you can see hypothalamus. Okay? Those are the three major regions produced from the most anterior region of the forebrain, right? Then you can see there is another region. So these are three regions that you study in your syllabus. There may be some more structures within the brain, but we within this region, but we don't study those parts, right? Next we move to the midbrain region, that is in red color. Midbrain. It develops into the midbrain region, right? Then if you go to the hindbrain region, so this area here, so it develops into three major parts which are called cerebellum, pons and medulla oblongata. Understood? Right? So these are the parts of the brain. Okay? So all these parts are present within the cranial cavity. So the cranial capacity of human is 1.5 liters. That is about 1500 milliliters. Okay. Right. Rest of the region of the neural cord of the embryonic brain actually develops into the spinal cord, which actually present in below. Understood? So these are the regions of the adult human brain develops from different parts of the embryonic brain. Next we move the brain, that is the most important part. Here you can see, as I explained earlier, These are the regions that I have explained. Anterior part of the dorsal nerve cord of the embryo develops into 3 major regions: the forebrain, midbrain, and the hindbrain. These regions give rise to different parts of the adult human brain. Right. Then forebrain, so those I explained earlier. Now this is for your understanding, further understanding. Forebrain gives rise to the cerebrum, thalamus, hypothalamus, and pineal body. Midbrain gives rise to a part of the brainstem. Then the hindbrain gives rise to cerebellum, pons varoli, and medulla oblongata. Then I am going to move to the next slide. So you can see external appearance of the brain and the longitudinal section of the brain. Okay? So these are actually 2 diagrams that is actually given in your textbook also. You can see the external appearance. It's very important, right? So if you are asked to explain the structure of the brain, you need to actually you need to explain this structure. Okay? Now you can see this is the lateral view, that is from the side of the brain. So you can see number of regions there. Okay? Here you can see the largest region. This is we call this largest region here. This is the largest region. This part is called cerebrum. Cerebrum. Then the second largest region here, you can see here, cerebellum. These are 2 words. This is cerebrum, cerebrum, cerebellum, right? Then you can see some other parts which can be seen to outside, pons varoli or just pons, and medulla oblongata. Then if you cut this along the length, then you can get the longitudinal view. Here, brain is actually cut along the midline and one side is removed, then the other side you can see. So the inner parts also can be seen. Understood? So this area here, as I explained earlier, the largest area, largest region, that is the cerebrum. Then you can see yellow color area, yellow color region. So which is called corpus callosum. This is the actually area which actually connect, so I explain little later, two parts of the cerebrum together. Then there are a number of parts here. Hypothalamus, as I explained earlier, which is actually developed from the forebrain, right? Hypothalamus. Then you can see pituitary gland, which is a very important endocrine gland. Thalamus, that is also part of the forebrain. So all these actually you can see in this region. Then this is, you can see it's actually complex compared to the embryonic brain. This is highly complex. Then you can see this area. These are the 3 regions, right? 3 regions develops from hindbrain, embryonic hindbrain, pons varoli, medulla, and the cerebellum, right? Then the midbrain region can be seen in this area. So it is not very clear. It is actually covered by this particular region, right? So we will see it later. Then I am going to explain you about the cerebrum, that is the largest region, largest part of the human brain. I will move to the next slide. So then you can see few important things related to the cerebrum. So here, if you keep the brain on your hands, so it is like that. Okay? So, you can see this is the anterior front region of the cerebrum. This is the back region of the cerebrum. These are two sides, laterals, right? And this surface here, it is the superior surface. So, now you can see another important thing. There is this type of cleft. This is called longitudinal groove. This actually present along the length of the brain. Did you understand? This is a longitudinal groove. Okay? So, this separates cerebrum into two parts. Did you understand? Right side is known as the right hemisphere, left side is known as left hemisphere. This is now you can see the longitudinal section. It also, this has, if you see this side, this should be left half of the real brain. Now, this is actually real brain. So, you can see actual shape of the brain looking at these two pictures. Did you understand? So, then you can see, now I will go back to my earlier slides. I am going to explain you about the cerebrum, that is the largest part of the human brain. So, you can see in this picture, real brain of the human. It has two parts, larger parts, which are called hemispheres. This is right hemisphere, this is left hemisphere. So, these two are separated by longitudinal fissure. This is a cleft, right? So, this actually moved down, this cleft is actually reached to the corpus callosum. This is we call corpus callosum. So, therefore, we have two hemispheres, right and left hemispheres. So, and these two are joined together by inferiorly by corpus callosum. Corpus callosum is a nerve tract which contain nerve fibers. So, now here you can see cerebrum is the largest part of the human brain, divided by deep cleft, or we call it longitudinal fissure, into right and left cerebral hemispheres. Superficial part of the cerebrum composed of nerve cell bodies. Superficial part. If you see this particular diagram, you can see this region here, this part. This is superficial region. So, this is what I told you earlier, the longitudinal fissure. Here you can see longitudinal fissure, this one, right? That is the deep cleft. This is we call the grey matter, right? This is also a section across the brain. Now, in this region you can see white matter. This is white matter. Cerebral cortex is made up of grey matter. This region is having white matter. Grey matter contains cell bodies of the neurons, Okay. White matter contains nerve fibers. Okay. So, then we can see cerebral cortex, and a deeper layer consists of nerve fibers, white matter. The two cerebral hemispheres are connected by corpus callosum. Here also you can see clearly in this green color the corpus callosum, how it is actually situated below the cerebrum, okay, which is a white matter, which is also a mass of white matter. Right. This is about the cerebrum. These are the parts of the cerebrum, right. Next we move, how it's actually the cerebrum is increased the surface area. Surface area is increased by forming large number of infoldings. You can see here, this is also a real brain. So, you can see it has large number of infoldings see, and these are called convolutions, right, which are present towards the outside. Now, these are important infolding, or we call sulci, needed for increase in the surface area of the cerebrum. Next thing, some of the sulci are very deep. Therefore, each cerebral hemisphere is divided into number of regions, right? Each cerebral hemisphere is divided into number of regions due to the presence of deep grooves, right? The cortex of each cerebral hemisphere is divided into 4 lobes, as you see here: frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. Each side is having 4 lobes. 2 sides are having 8 lobes. Understood? Right. Next one. Then we studied gross structure. We studied gross structure of the human cerebrum. Now, it contains number of functional areas. Now, you can see the cerebral cortex contains number of functional areas, which are known as sensory areas, association areas, and motor areas. These are present in different parts of the brain. Did you understand? So, as you see here in this particular region, this yellow color region, right, in the parietal lobe, so this area is called a certain kind of sensory area. Okay, we call it somatosensory because it is actually related to the body movements, right? Muscle movement, legs movement, hand movements, like this, somatosensory. Then likewise, there are so many sensory areas. This area contains visual sensory area, right? There are some other regions like that, sensory speech area. Likewise, sensory areas are present. In addition to that, it contains motor areas. Sensory areas are to get the nerve impulses from different sensory organs throughout the body. Did you understand? Throughout the body. Motor areas are to send certain impulses from this region to the different effector organs to carry out responses, right? Motor area, this is one of the motor area. So, in between these regions contain association areas to relate these sensory information and to produce motor responses, right? So, sensory association areas may be present in different regions. So, these are 3 important regions in the human cerebrum. Okay, children, we are going to study about the functions of the cerebrum, right? It's given in a very convenient way. So, in a tabulated form, structure of the cerebrum: frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. So, you can see major functions are given in frontal region: behavior, intelligence, memory, movements. So, those are actually coordinated by this region, frontal region. Parietal region, so you can see language, reading, sensation are done by parietal lobe. Temporal, related to speech, hearing, and the memory, right? Occipital, visual processing. So, you can see more detail about this particular actions of the brain in this particular diagram: motor sensory region of the cerebral cortex, right? So, you can see again I have actually given detailed diagram here. Primary sensory cortex, sensory association areas are given here. So, this is actually more complex diagram than the earlier, just to explain you how complex is the brain is, right? Then visual association, visual cortex, likewise so many functions are done by cerebrum. Next I am going to move thalamus and the hypothalamus. That is also developed from the forebrain of the embryonic region, thalamus and the hypothalamus. Now you can see here in this diagram, thalamus is marked here. So it is actually present, situated deeper region of the cerebrum. Did you understand? Deeper region of the cerebrum. Okay, in front of the thalamus, hypothalamus, little bit below, hypothalamus is situated here in this region. Okay, hypothalamus, right? So you know, attached to the hypothalamus, very important endocrine gland, this one, that is pituitary. Understood, right? Thalamus. Now I am going to explain you the thalamus location. Location, this is how we explain the location. Within the cerebral hemispheres, you can see this is situated deeper region of the cerebral hemispheres, right? Just below the corpus callosum, this is the corpus callosum, right? It is very clear. So this is actually present within the cerebral hemispheres. So deeper region of the cerebral hemispheres, right? And below the corpus callosum. Understood, right? Then you can see the structure. Actually this contains two masses of white matter and grey matter. Now below this diagram here you can see only the thalamus is shown here, this part. This is the thalamus, you can see it. So removing the cerebrum completely, so then you can see the thalamus present within the brain, right? These are the two lobes in the thalamus. So you can understand the position of the thalamus, right? It contains two masses of grey and white matter. Very important region in the brain. Thalamus functions act as the main input center of sensory information from special sense organs, sensory receptors in the skin and integral organs. That is one of the important functions. Input center of sensory information, right? The sensory information is actually reached to this place and diverted into different region of the cerebral hemispheres, right? Sensory information is sorted and directed in specific location of the cerebral cortex for further processing and perception, right? So that's what thalamus does, right? It relays and redistributes. Now all these, what does it mean, relays? Sensory information or the sensory impulses are coming through this area, spinal cord, through this region and through this region and finally into the thalamus. Then it relays, it actually transfers into another neuron within this particular structure. So therefore, it is a very important structure and it redistributes into different regions of the brain, right? Those are the major function of thalamus, right? Okay. Then I move into the hypothalamus. So as I explained earlier, hypothalamus is situated in front and little bit below, right? Below and in front of the thalamus. You can see this is the thalamus, this area is the hypothalamus and immediately above the pituitary gland, right? That is also very clear. Understood? Now I am going to explain you about the functions of the hypothalamus, right? number of different functions are actually carried out by hypothalamus, right. So, this is actually very important region related to the homeostasis, right. Regulates body temperature, that is one of the important function. Then regulates thirst and water balance, right. Regulates appetite, regulates sleep and wake cycle, controls autonomic nervous system, initiates fight and flight responses, source of posterior pituitary hormone and releasing hormones, those act on anterior pituitary, plays a role in sexual behavior. Those are the functions related to the hypothalamus. Then brainstem, right. So, this is also a very interesting part of the brain, area between thalamus and the spinal cord. Now, you can see in this particular animation, green color regions are the thalamus, right. Here this below this area spinal cord. In between you can see number of areas, okay. So, this part, so this is rotating things you can see with 4 structures behind. So, that area is called midbrain, right. Next one here is known as the pons, and this one is known as medulla, right. Those are the 3 parts of this brainstem, understood. So, all the top regions are situated on this particular structure, understood, right. So, as you seen in the slide, area between thalamus and the spinal cord, 3 regions of the brain belong to it, midbrain, pons varoli and the medulla oblongata, right. Then I am going to explain you about midbrain, that is one part of the brainstem, that is the upper part. So, you can see below the thalamus, above the pons. So, this purple color region, right, that is the midbrain, understood. So, it contains some other small structures, but we are going to study the major function of the midbrain, understood. So, it actually surrounds the duct which connects the third ventricle and fourth ventricle. Third ventricle is present within the thalamus area. Fourth ventricle is present within the hindbrain region. So, there is actually a duct which connects these 2 together. That duct runs through the midbrain, understood, right, okay. Then fourth ventricle is present in this region, third ventricle present in this region. So, these 2 connect together by duct through midbrain, right. Then structure, it contains aggregate of nerve cell bodies and nerve tracts which connect cerebrum with spinal cord. Cerebrum is in the top region, spinal cord below. So, the nerve tract actually run through this, right, carrying sensory impulses or the sensory neurons, and the nerves actually move through this particular tract, right, okay. Then the functions of the midbrain. So, it acts as relay station for ascending and descending nerve fibers, right, receives and integrates sensory information, auditory and visual, and send it to the particular region of the forebrain and coordinates auditory and visual reflexes. Visual reflexes, for example, the change in the size of the pupil, the change in of the head for a certain sound quickly. So, those are actually auditory and visual reflexes. Change in the pupil without your without your control, involuntary action. It's an involuntary action. It occurs due to the activity of the midbrain. Pons varoli. So, you can see here, this area contains large number of nerve fibers. So, the behind the pons contain this type of region, right. So, which is called the cerebellum, understood. Behind this contains cerebellum. So, therefore, when we are explaining the location, what we should explain? It should be explained as in front of the cerebellum, okay, and below the midbrain. This is the midbrain, and above the medulla oblongata. So, that is how we have to explain. Always location has to be explained related to different parts, different structures in the brain, right. So, that is the location of Pons varoli. Then structure contain nerve fibers that form a bridge between two hemispheres of the cerebellum, right. Contains nerve fibers pass in between higher levels of brain and the spinal cord. Groups of nerve cell bodies form centers that regulate respiration. You know, respiration, when you study respiration, you study about the regulation of the respiration, rate of respiration. So, normal breathing is actually carried out by the medulla, but regulation is done by the centers situated in the pons, understood. Some nerve cell bodies act as relay station. Again, there also we can see the places or the areas which actually transfer nerve impulses which actually come in through the spinal cord into the different part of the brain. Then functions, further some more functions, transfers information between PNS, peripheral nervous system, and the midbrain and forebrain, coordinates large scale body movements such as climbing and the running. Together with the medulla oblongata, helps regulate respiration. Next point, medulla oblongata. So, you can see here, right, this area, this whole area, this is here midbrain, this area midbrain, pons and the medulla. All three together we call the brainstem, but what we are going to study about the medulla oblongata, that is the rear portion or the rear portion of the brainstem, right, or the lowest part of the brainstem, which extend this area medulla, which extend with the spinal cord below, understood. So, up to this region, this area completely present within the cranium. So, beyond this region, so it is present within the vertebral column. Did you understand, right? So, it is very important structure, medulla oblongata. It contains very important centers. We call cardiovascular center, respiratory center, and reflex centers. It's a very important region of the brain. Functions of medulla. Transfers information between PNS. PNS is this area here. So, all the information coming from the outside the body. So, the everywhere in the body actually move through this region into this, that is the medulla, then into the pons, then into the midbrain, and finally into different parts of the brain, right. Therefore, transfers information between PNS and the midbrain and the forebrain. This area is the forebrain. Coordinates various body movements such as running and climbing. Further functions of medulla, controls several autonomic homeostatic functions including breathing, heart and blood vessel activities. So, that is why we need actually this contain respiratory center and cardiovascular center. Controls involuntary reflexes such as vomiting, swallowing, coughing, sneezing through reflex centers. So, those are the functions of the medulla. Cerebellum. So, this is the important structure again. So, the located behind. So, you can see Pons here, this is Pons. Then you can see the medulla oblongata, midbrain. So, it is actually situated behind, right, Pons, right. This is the fourth ventricle here. So, I explained about this in earlier lesson, right. Cerebellum. Cerebellum is the second largest structure in the brain, understood. It also contains two hemispheres, two lobes, right, two hemispheres. Functions: coordinate voluntary muscle movements, maintain posture and balance, helps in learning and remembering motor skills, right. So, those are the functions of the cerebellum. Then we move to the spinal cord, right. So, that is the rest of the region of the central nervous system, right. Now, brain, we studied about the brain, right, the different parts of the brain. Now, spinal cord is the rest of the region. So, it also carry very important function within our body and related to the coordination, right. Now, spinal cord, we can see here I have actually given you two diagrams. One is the cross section diagram. The next one here, if I say A and B, so B is the microscopic view, right. This is actually a structure moving through the vertebral column. Did you understand? So, you can see here just one vertebra, right. So, and the spinal cord is here, understood, right. So, it actually produces spinal nerves at different regions. These are spinal nerves. So, the spinal nerves are emerged from the spinal cord. This is how the spinal cord and the spinal nerves move through adjacent vertebrae. It actually contains, spinal nerves actually move between two vertebrae. So, which are called intervertebral foramen. So, that is actually, it makes a very small hole between two vertebrae, which is called intervertebral foramen. So, through which spinal nerves emerge, right. Then here I have shown here spinal cross section of spinal cord. So, it contains number of parts, right. Here you can see it is actually surrounded by three meninges as I explained in earlier lesson, dura mater, arachnoid mater and pia mater, right. All three are actually seen here, right. Spinal cord is well protected inside this, understood, and it runs through the vertebral column, right. It is an elongated cylindrical structure suspended in the vertebral canal, continuous with the medulla oblongata. Center of the spinal cord contains the central canal, which is surrounded by grey matter. Outer region is made up of white matter. I will show you how grey matter and white matter are arranged in the spinal cord. See this diagram, right. This area here, this H-shaped region is the grey matter, right. Surrounding this, so this is the spinal cord, rest of the region, this area called white matter, right. It is normally, you can see, roughly divided into two sides by certain structures in this, which we do not need to know about in detail, right? White matter, grey matter. Within the grey matter, this H zone, so you can see small canal which is called central canal. So that is the canal which connect with the ventricles in the brain. So through which cerebrospinal fluid is flowing, right? Then I am moving to the next one. One of the important functions is to transmit sensory impulses, right, through the spinal cord into the brain, right. You can see here. Now, in this particular diagram, you can't actually see that. This is actually the second important feature, which is to produce simple reflexes. So, here what you can see is sensory neurons. These actually transmit impulses into the spinal cord, and then there is a neuron within the grey matter. So, through which transmission of the impulse is actually taken place, and then what happened, according to that the impulse, motor neuron carries impulse to the effector organ. This type of action, this type of path is known as reflex arc. So, that happens for the sudden activities in the body, right, sudden action. So, like removing your hand from the hot object. So, that is in that type of action is known as simple reflex. So, only 3 neurons are involved in this particular activity, right. So, that is most of the reflexes, right, spinal reflexes occur in the body happen with the spinal cord. Therefore, it is important related to simple reflexes. Then function of the spinal cord links the central nervous system to sensory and motor neurons and facilitate nerve impulse propagation towards the brain and away the brain. Coordinates and produces reflexes, that is what I have explained earlier. Okay. Right. Next, peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system, here I have actually given you a diagram without cranial nerves. Cranial nerves are also included into the peripheral nervous system, but here what I have shown here is spinal nerves and the ganglia. So, in this brain region here, it produces large number of cranial nerves as well, 12 pairs of cranial nerves, right. Therefore, peripheral nervous system consists of 3 components: cranial nerves, spinal nerves and ganglia. So, I will show you how they are arranged, right. 2 types of neurons in peripheral nervous system. One type is called the afferent neurons or the sensory neurons, which are the neurons which actually transmit impulses into the central nervous system, right, from the sensory organs, right. The other one is efferent neurons or the motor neurons, which actually transmit impulses transmit instructions to the effector organs from the central nervous system, right. You can see here in this diagram, sensory impulses are transmitted sensory neurons, and the motor neurons actually carry information from the central nervous system to the effector organs. Now, here you can see effector organs are the muscles, glands and the endocrine cells which carry out responses, and the sensory or the afferent neurons are the neurons which are actually starting from the sensory receptors. Sensory receptors are present throughout the body like skin, and the pressure receptors. Likewise, there are so many receptors are present throughout the body. Next, two efferent now if you take the motor system, motor neurons, it actually has two efferent components, right? Neurons in two different systems, right? One is called motor system, right? Controls voluntary activities, right? Supplies nerve impulses to skeletal muscles. The other system is called the autonomic nervous system. So, that also carries information from the brain and the spinal cord. So, which are related to the involuntary activities. Therefore, efferent components. So, you can see central nervous system, peripheral nervous system contain motor division and the sensory division. Motor division contain somatic nervous system or the motor system we call motor system. So, which actually send impulses, right. So, these are efferent, these contain efferent neurons, send impulses to skeletal muscles for the skeletal muscle movements. Autonomic nervous system contain efferent neurons which supply neurons to sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions, nervous system. Sympathetic and parasympathetic systems are involved with the endocrine glands or the glands in the body, then the cardiac muscles and the smooth muscles. So, those are the organs which actually get impulses or the information from autonomic nervous system, right. That is why we call the motor division contain two components, motor system and the autonomic nervous system. Then the cranial nerves, that is actually part of the cranial nerves are part of the peripheral nervous system, 12 pairs and emerge from the brainstem, right. Contribute to produce sensory nerves, some actually produce sensory nerves, some motor and some mixed nerves, right. Efferent nerves contribute to both motor and autonomic efferent systems. So, these are the cranial nerves. In this particular diagram you can see all 12 pairs of cranial nerves are given in different colors, right, all actually derived from the inferior surface of the brain. Spinal nerves, 31 pairs are present, right, 31 pairs. I showed you earlier how these actually emerge from the spinal cord, right. Spinal cord through intervertebral foramina formed by the adjacent vertebrae. They contribute supplying sensory and motor nerves. These are the spinal nerves, so related to different region of the body, cervical, thoracic, lumbar. So, likewise there are number of spinal nerves in the body. So, that is actually total number is 31 pairs. Now, we are going to study about the autonomic nervous system. It has two main divisions, sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Sympathetic nervous system mainly for fight and flight, right, prepares the body for intense physical activity or certain emergency conditions. Parasympathetic nervous system, so that is for the relaxing and the digestion. So, that is for the normal resting processes in the body, rest and digest. In parasympathetic division, nervous supply is from cranial nerves and the spinal nerves present in the sacral region. For the sympathetic division, you can see here spinal nerves are involved, thoracic region and the lumbar region. The spinal nerves emerge from these two regions are involved in supplying nerve impulses to sympathetic division. So, they are actually always sympathetic does the opposite reaction to the parasympathetic. As I explained earlier, parasympathetic is involved in the normal resting activities in the body, and for the digestion, and for the sympathetic involves in emergency situation. Now you can see here the major difference, one of the important difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic. As you see, just look at the pupil of these two eyes, right. So in sympathetic you can see the pupil size, the pupil is dilated. In the parasympathetic, pupil is constricted. So dilation is for accidents or the sudden activities or emergencies, right. So this is one of the example for sympathetic and parasympathetic. Then there are actually number of differences between parasympathetic and sympathetic, as you see in here. I explained earlier the regions actually which supply nerves to sympathetic and parasympathetic. You can see thoracic and lumbar region of the spinal cord, sympathetic neural system emerge, and the parasympathetic, so that is actually cranial region and the sacral region. Sympathetic ganglia are linked to form a chain. So if you see this diagram, sympathetic ganglia, so these are the ganglia. Ganglia form a chain, right. So but here there is no chain of parasympathetic ganglia. In parasympathetic division, it contained isolated ganglia in different close to the organs, effector organs, right. That is one of important difference. And these nerves, the before the ganglion, so which is called this nerve is known as the preganglionic fiber. The one actually moving out of the ganglion is called post-ganglionic fiber. This is post, this is preganglionic fiber. This is preganglionic, this is post-ganglionic. So you can see the difference between these two. Parasympathetic preganglionic fiber is long, but in the sympathetic preganglionic fibers are short, and the other one is also the opposite, right. So likewise there are so many differences between sympathetic neural system or the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Preganglionic fibers are short and postganglionic fibers are long. So the next one you can see neurotransmitter substance. Neurotransmitter substance, noradrenaline in this one, sympathetic, acetylcholine in parasympathetic. Active in stressful conditions in sympathetic, relaxing condition. Then the overall effect is excitatory and stimulating, this is inhibitory. Fight and flight responses and the rest and digest. So the recap. Overall functions of the nervous system are coordination, homeostasis and integration. Sympathetic and parasympathetic have antagonistic or opposite functions on the majority of the body organs. Sympathetic stimulation prepare the body for fight or flight functions. Parasympathetic stimulation for rest and digestion. Right, few questions I prepare for your understanding, so to get whether you have understood this particular lesson, right. First one, select the response that correctly indicates the part of the human brain and the function, right. Thalamus. If you go through the lesson properly, if you understood the structure and function, then it is not difficult to answer this question, right. Thalamus, regulation of appetite, so that is done by the hypothalamus. Maintenance of posture, that is not the function of hypothalamus, that is from the cerebellum, right. Coordination, visual, reflexes, just leave it like that. Then see fourth and fifth answers. Regulation of sleep and wake cycle, that is also hypothalamus. Initiation of fight and or flight responses, that is also hypothalamus. So this is the only correct answer. Midbrain, coordination of visual reflexes, right. So, out of these 5 answers, 3 answers are correct related to the hypothalamus, understood, right. The next question, which of the following statement regarding the autonomic nervous system of man is incorrect. So, that is the incorrect answer you need to find. Plays an important role in homeostasis, that is a correct answer. Its sympathetic activity predominates in emergency and stress conditions, that is correct. So, I told you, so the normal emergency and stress conditions sympathetic activities are predominate. Parasympathetic preganglionic fibers are short, preganglionic fibers are long in the parasympathetic, therefore, this is wrong answer. Sympathetic stimulation causes bronchodilation is correct. So, that is for the emergency situation. Parasympathetic stimulation increase peristalsis, that is the rest, digestion, right, that is correct. So, therefore, third answer is incorrect, right. Then the third question, which of the following region of the human brain is related to the intelligence. So, that is if you go through the summary that I have given, so you can easily find the answer frontal lobe, right. In this fourth question, so you need to actually find the correct answer from these 5 options, right. Pons spheroli connects 2 hemispheres of the cerebellum, this is correct answer. This is the end of today's lesson, children. I hope you study very important system related to human body today. So, if you need actually more details about this particular system, you need to study through your resource book and also through textbooks, and need to do certain exercises like MCQ and the structured essay question papers to improve your knowledge for the exam. If you need to familiar with this lesson, you can actually go through channel NIE YouTube for further studies. You can repeat this lesson again and again until you become familiar, and we are going to do the next lesson in future. Until then, goodbye.